Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. On this Super Tuesday, Joe Biden is showing early momentum tonight with projected wins in Virginia and North Carolina. And Bernie Sanders takes his home state of Vermont, with many more states still to come. Then, as the death toll from coronavirus in the U.S. continues to climb, the Federal Reserve reacts with the most significant emergency action since the financial collapse. Plus, an epicenter of the outbreak, a report from Iran where cases of COVID-19 are skyrocketing and distrust of leaders mounts as government officials come down with the virus.
This is the result of the chronic weakness of the management of our country. When you lose people's trust, even when you tell the truth, people won't believe you.
All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the Columbia and Snake Rivers, travelers retrace the route forged by Lewis and Clark more than 200 years ago. American Cruise Line's fleet of Victorian-style paddle wheelers and modern riverboats travels through American landscapes to historic landmarks where you can experience local customs and cuisine. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
When it comes to wireless, Consumer Cellular gives its customers the choice. Our no-contract plans give you as much or as little talk, text, and data as you want. And our U.S.-based customer service team is on hand to help. To learn more, go to consumercellular.tv.
BNSF Railway. Fidelity Investments.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
On this Super Tuesday, it is just after 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and the polls in 12 of the 14 states voting today are now closed. And with a third of all Democratic delegates up for grabs, today is the biggest voting day of the primary season. Here are the results so far. Joe Biden, the projected winner in Virginia, in North Carolina, and in Alabama. Bernie Sanders, projected winner in his home state of Vermont and just moments ago in the state of Colorado. We do not yet have projected winners in these following states: Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Arkansas, Minnesota, and Texas. And again, all the polls have closed in those states, but we're waiting for the results to come in. We have much more to look for this evening, but as of right now, Joe Biden has for the first time taken the lead in the all-important delegate count. We do have a host of NewsHour correspondents and public media reporters who are spread out in Super Tuesday states across the country, from California to Minnesota to North Carolina, Massachusetts, and Virginia. But we start with Texas. It is the second biggest delegate prize of the night. 228 delegates at stake, and that's where NewsHour's political reporter Dan Bush is now, and he joins me from Houston. So, Dan, clearly the polls just closing there. We don't have a call yet, but this is a state where Bernie Sanders had been doing well. Mike Bloomberg had put some money in. It's also the state where Joe Biden had some very big endorsements last night.
That's right, Judy. Biden is surging here, seemingly. And yes, we don't have results yet. It's a big state, some of the biggest cities in the country. It will take a while. Texans are used to that. It might be a long night here. But already Democrats here in the state are saying that they're breathing a sigh of relief. As one source told me, these are moderate Democrats who see a very good night cropping up for Joe Biden. Elsewhere, a senior Biden official just told me that looking at these other states, two things are clear the Biden campaign is arguing. Number one, Mike Bloomberg invested a lot of money in states like North Carolina and Virginia, might not win delegates there. And number two, the Biden campaign says Bernie Sanders' electability argument is not holding up. Now, here in Texas, we're going to have to wait and see. As you said, two of the biggest delegate prizes are still up for grabs. Texas and California. Biden is doing well here. Sanders has made a lot of inroads here, Judy, in recent weeks, especially with Latino voters. So we're waiting to see how those sort of key voting groups play out here in Texas. And one more thing, Judy, the Bloomberg campaign is saying, wait a second, let's slow down a little bit. One senior advisor texted me, said, nothing surprising here so far, but they invested a lot of money in Texas, so they may not have won the other states. They do need to do well here, Judy.
And you're right, they did invest a lot of money there, as they have in a number of other states. Texas, a state that we don't expect to have an early projection in, but we will see. Dan Bush, thanks very much joining us from Houston. And now from Minneapolis, Mary LaHammer of Twin Cities PBS. Mary, this is Amy Klobuchar's home state, but it's a state that she knew she was going to have a tough time in. You've been talking to voters in the last hours who are big supporters of Bernie Sanders. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I talked to 3 different Sanders voters, and 2 of them are young men, and they both said the issue that they are backing Sanders on is Medicare for all, and also they want to change in politics. They said they didn't want to go back, and I think perceive Biden as going back to politics as usual, old Washington. They want change, and they said Trump changed everything, and Bernie works to that change. Now, that is also borne out in some of the early exit polls. The Associated Press is showing the #1 issue in Minnesota is health care. And the #2 issue is the environment. So that definitely is in line with some of those younger Bernie voters who are feeling the burn. Now, the interesting thing, this 3rd Sanders voter I talked to is a Republican. It was a Republican who was going to vote for Amy Klobuchar, didn't think he was going to vote, at the last minute decided to jump in the Democratic presidential primary here in order to create mischief. He said he voted for Sanders because he thinks that's the best for Trump and the worst for Democrats. He doesn't think that'll help Democrats down ballot here. So a lot of interesting things happening with the Sanders voters as we're waiting for our results to come in here pretty soon.
And just quickly, Mary, you were telling us that health care, big issue for the voters there in Minnesota?
Absolutely. You know, we are home to many, many large medical companies. We have the world famous Mayo Clinic, one of the largest medical institutions in the world, and also things like Medtronic, one of the largest medical device companies. So definitely healthcare is an issue that voters not just care about, but are really smart and are educated, and it pays their paychecks around here.
All right, Mary LaHammer reporting for us, Twin Cities PBS in Minneapolis, Minnesota tonight. And we are able to share a projection now, and that is in the state of Oklahoma. Joe Biden projected by the Associated Press to pick up that state. That would make, by my count, 4 states where Biden has been projected to win, in Virginia, in North Carolina, in Alabama, and now in the state of Oklahoma. So we will continue to look as the numbers come in from there. In the meantime, let's skip over to Virginia, where our Lisa Desjardins has spent the day. This is a state that was called, as we said, for Joe Biden just as the polls closed at 7 o'clock. Lisa, this is a big win for the senator. It was a state that Bloomberg was contesting, and you're trying to get some sense of why it went so big for Biden.
We have a lot of sense of that. One reason, Judy, is the area I'm standing in. This is Alexandria. This is Northern Virginia. This is the most blue part of Virginia. And this area saw a huge turnout, Judy. And it looks like a lot of that turnout went for Joe Biden. Also, Judy, in the last day, we know those who made decisions just in the last day, overwhelmingly, some 54%, according to voter surveys, went for Joe Biden. That's 40 points more than any other candidate in the last few days. That is the effect of South Carolina and, of course, the endorsements we've seen, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, over the last few days. But I also want to drill down on another topic that's important to Democrats, race. Let's look at how voters in Virginia, when they identified their race, how they voted. If you look at first black voters, some 54% of them voted for Joe Biden. We saw, of course, that strength in South Carolina, but he also won with white voters, with 40% of them voting for Joe Biden. So this is a sign the Biden camp is saying that he can reach across different parts of the core Democratic base. And Judy, I just was speaking to the Biden campaign, and similar to what Dan Bush is reporting, they say that the win in Virginia is important. It shows Biden can win in a swing state, and they're questioning whether Bernie Sanders can do that as well. Clearly, they see it as a matchup between those two men.
Interesting, so interesting in Virginia, Lisa, that late deciders who made up a big chunk of the electorate in Virginia went very heavily for Joe Biden. Sorry about the wind. It looks like we may. Do we have you? Lisa Desjardins,
right.
are you there? Okay, we'll come back to you, Lisa. It looks like it's raining and windy, and we're going to let her pull all that together and come back. Meantime, let's skip one state south of where Lisa is, from Virginia down to North Carolina, where Yamiche Alcindor spent a number of days. She's got more on Vice President Joe Biden's victory there. Yamiche, this was another early call. As soon as the polls closed in North Carolina, the projection was made that Biden would win.
Take a look at the story.
That's right, Judy. And North Carolina is seen as a crucial state when it comes to candidates looking at electability. While it has the third most delegates, they're about with 110 delegates, what you see is in this state, Democrats really wanting to wrestle it back from Republicans. So in 2020, in November, that's when Democrats are really going to be trying to put in work to try to wrestle it back from Republicans who won it in 2016 with President Trump winning the state by about 3%. But looking at what voters cared about, Joe Biden, if we can put it up for viewers, Joe Biden won something like 46% of people who describe themselves as moderates here. Mike Bloomberg won about 17%, Bernie Sanders 16%, Elizabeth Warren, who was seen as someone who was really struggling in this rate, at 8%, and Pete Buttigieg, who of course dropped out, got 6%. It's also important to note that voters here, as they did apparently in Minnesota and other parts of the state and other parts of the country, rather, they said that health care was their number one issue. And when you look at voters who thought health care was the most important issue, Joe Biden was the one who won those voters. Also, if you looked at voters who were thinking about racial relations as their top issue, he also won those voters. And if you were a voter who was deciding late, guess what? You also went for Joe Biden. So the Joe Biden campaign is saying, look, not only is North Carolina a good win for us, it also shows that we are the most electable candidate, and we're the candidate who can beat Donald Trump.
And very quickly, Yamiche, and sorry about that interruption a minute ago while you were talking, but looking at the survey of voters as they went to the polls in North Carolina, health care far and away their most important issue.
So many of the voters out there.
That's right, Judy. And it's an interesting issue because Democrats and Republicans have really been fighting over the issue of health care. Now, Bernie Sanders has been pushing Medicare for all. He's been saying, I wrote the blank bill, and he's been saying, I'm the one who came up with that idea. But Joe Biden has said, hold on, wait a minute. The Affordable Care Act was something that I knew about very intricately as vice president to President Obama, and I know how to tweak it and to be able to make it so that health care is better for voters across this country. And in North Carolina, voters who thought health care should be tweaked rather than completely upended meant that they wanted to go for Joe Biden. And as a result, voters who cared most about health care voted for Joe Biden in large numbers.
All right, Yamiche Alcindor joining us tonight from Raleigh, North Carolina, a state that has been projected for Joe Biden. Now, let's move up to New England, to Massachusetts. I'm joined by WGBH's Adam Riley in Boston. Adam, this is Elizabeth Warren's home state. She's the senator representing Massachusetts, of course, but Bernie Sanders was giving her a run for the money. She's already come out and talked with supporters. I think it was in Detroit. We saw her over an hour ago. What do you make of all that?
You know, it's, I guess, reasonable when you think about it from her campaign's perspective that she would move on to Michigan, the next big contest, if she thinks she's not going to have a terrific night this evening. I think it raised some eyebrows when she chose not to stick around her home state. Also raising eyebrows is that the watch parties that her campaign put together for people to take in the results as they came in, they were actually closed to the press, which is unusual. I haven't encountered something like that before. So you get the impression that she is girding for a poorer than expected or anticipated night. I went back and looked at the memo that her campaign manager circulated on the day of the New Hampshire primary, making their case for a path to victory. And it's interesting to note that in that memo, they said that Warren was on pace for a top 2 finish in 8 of the 14 Super Tuesday states. And at this point, I don't believe that she's hit that in any of the races that we've had called. And she might not have even hit it in Massachusetts, which would be, I think, a real blow in terms of perception.
Massachusetts still not called. The polls close there at 8 o'clock Eastern. Adam, what's your thinking about that?
Well, I think there's no question that the exodus of candidates that we saw has changed the landscape here. I mean, it looked like it was going to be Warren and Sanders. Sanders seemed to have a slight edge for a long time. He came to the state over the course of the weekend, held this great big rally in Boston. There's a lot of Sanders enthusiasm here. He almost beat Hillary Clinton back in 2016 in the primary. But to have all those moderates consolidate around Joe Biden, I think probably hurt Warren's chances of a strong finish here, a 1 or a 2. We'll see how she does. It's worth noting, just for viewers at home who might not be familiar with Massachusetts politics, the state has this stereotype as a liberal bastion, but the Democratic Party here contains multitudes, and they range from people to the left of Elizabeth Warren to very moderate Democrats in the legislature who are basically ideologically just like our Republican governor, Charlie Baker. So there's a market for that kind of Democratic politics, and I think we're seeing Biden tap into it tonight.
You are right. A lot of stereotypes going around, and often they are not on the money. We need to rethink a lot of those stereotypes. All right, Adam Riley, thank you very much. WGBH in Boston. So all the way to the West Coast now and to California, the biggest prize for this evening, 415 delegates up for grabs. Our Amna Nawaz is in San Francisco. Amna, the polls don't close there until 11 o'clock. Eastern, 8 o'clock your time. But what is so interesting about the state is clearly it's the biggest treasure trove of delegates, but the candidates have to be so strategic in how they think about what they want to pick up.
That's absolutely right, Judy. It is the big kahuna, we've heard it called, the gold rush of delegates here. And there's still a long way to go before we know where those delegates will be going. It's worth pointing out we're standing here in San Francisco outside of City Hall, which is both a polling location, meaning people can show up and fill out the ballots and cast them as we see happen in other parts of the country. It's also, if you can see the tent over my shoulder here, a drop-off ballot location, because we know mail-in voting is so huge in California. And I should note that just over the last couple of hours, as offices have closed, as people are getting off of work, we have seen a significant increase in the number of people coming up to drop off their ballots there, walk away with their little I voted stickers, and come in and out of this building to cast their ballots. So there's still a lot of activity happening right here in San Francisco, more lines here. Also, we're getting reports from other parts of California, specifically around Los Angeles County, of hour or 2 hour waits to vote. Los Angeles, we should mention, the mayor there, Eric Garcetti, of course, endorsed Joe Biden, so we don't know exactly what that means. We should also point out that Joe Biden picked up a late endorsement from California's Central Valley. You talked about those many individual congressional races here. California has those 53 distinct congressional districts. That's where all the candidates are fighting to pick up those delegates. And an endorsement from a congressman in the Central Valley for Joe Biden means that that area where Senator Sanders had been putting in some effort, where Mayor Buttigieg, before he dropped out, had been putting in some effort, will be likely breaking for Joe Biden there as well. So we're looking at those individual districts. We don't have results to share just yet, but of course, we know there were a lot of late voters here. Of the 16 million ballots that were sent out to Californians weeks ago, just a fraction so far have been returned, just over 4 million, just over a quarter of those ballots. We don't know where those late deciders were going to go. Maybe many of them, like the voters we spoke to in the Central Valley, were waiting to see how Joe Biden or some other moderate candidates were doing. That's some of the voters we talked to were telling us exactly that. So maybe they're waiting till the last minute to cast their ballots. It's still a very long way to go here in California.
Well, in effect, you're telling us to brace ourselves because it is going to take some time. It's such a, the people salivate to think, the candidates do, the campaigns do, to think about the number of delegates available in California, but it's going to be a while before we know how it all shakes out.
It will be a while. We should mention, yes, that's right, Judy. It will be a while. We should also just mention that Senator Sanders has been leading in the polls. His campaign says they remain optimistic as the whole contest moves west. He'll continue to perform strongly, but we wait and we watch.
Amna Nawaz reporting from San Francisco. Thank you. Thank you, Amna. And we want to share with you right now, one of the candidates has come out and spoken to his supporters in West Palm Beach, Florida, Mike Bloomberg. Here's what he had to say just a little over half an hour ago.
My fellow candidates spent a whole year focusing on the first 4 states. I was out campaigning against Donald Trump in the states where the election will actually be decided, like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pittsburgh and Ohio and North Carolina and, of course, Florida. President Obama proved that a Democrat can win all of those states, but in 2016, we lost them all. Well, I'm running to win them back.
That was Mike Bloomberg speaking to supporters in Palm Beach, Florida, just a short time ago. At this point, Bloomberg has projected the winner in only one of the places voting on this Super Tuesday. That is American Samoa, the U.S. territory out in the Pacific. And we do have a race to call, and that is in the state of Tennessee. The projected winner, based on early results and interviews with voters as they were heading out into the polling places today, Joe Biden in the state of Tennessee. So that is racking up another win. I think by my count, that's 5 states where Joe Biden has been projected the winner on this Super Tuesday. Joining me now in our NewsHour studio for some more analysis, Stu Rothenberg, senior editor of Inside Elections. Good to have you with us again, Stu.
Thanks,
so
Judy.
The projections are starting to come in. It's looking like a really good night for Joe Biden. We have a way to go, but we're beginning to see the outlines of something.
I'm tempted to introduce you to my friend, Mr. Momentum. If you think back, it was just a few weeks that Joe Biden had no field operation, he had no money, he had no organization, he wasn't in a good place in many of these states. And suddenly things have changed. Obviously, candidates have dropped out. He won South Carolina, he won it big. But much of this seems to be momentum. I mean, he is competitive in Massachusetts now. So we were expecting that to be a Warren-Sanders fight with Biden not in the race. So Bloomberg seems to be viable in a handful of states, Texas, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. Just the numbers I saw, he was in the low 20s, so he might be viable, and that could keep him going. He seems to want to keep going.
What was the other state? Texas?
Texas,
Oklahoma?
Tennessee, and Oklahoma. I showed him
Biden
around 20%.
has now been projected the winner in Tennessee.
Right. But I'm just talking
you're
about
saying
viability, more than 15%
picked
of the
up some
vote.
delegates,
Yeah.
and we haven't been talking a lot about delegates tonight, but that is going to be part of the equation.
Right, and we're waiting for Texas and California to see. California could change the entire narrative. If Senator Sanders has a big night in California, that will change things. But at the moment, I think you have to say that former Vice President Biden is holding the South. He is showing muscle in places we weren't sure he was going to hold. He's holding senior citizens very well, older voters 65 and over. He's winning overwhelmingly, and he's doing great among African Americans.
And among young voters,
Bernie Sanders still clobbering the field with younger voters. It's just that there aren't as many of them as there are voters 65 and over in most states, in all states.
I believe, Stu Rothenberg, we have a graphic right now we can share with our audience. This is what the delegate count looks like at this point. It's still early, but here you see, I mean, Joe Biden started out before Super Tuesday, Stu, not way out in the lead, but look at that, 174. Yeah. Again, it's early. There's still...
And he's winning some states that Hillary Clinton won against Bernie Sanders. So some of these states he should win and he needs to win. But there is a kind of the subtext, there's an undercurrent of overperformance for Joe Biden. And again, it wasn't long ago that people were saying, can Bernie Sanders be stopped? Maybe not.
Well, exactly. I mean, the conversation you were hearing coming into Super Tuesday was Bernie Sanders could come out of this big delegate-rich day with such a lead that it would be very difficult. It would be very, right, 300, even 500 delegate lead. But it looks like Joe Biden has, I don't want to say risen from the dead.
I would say there's more pressure on the Sanders campaign now to perform late in the evening and overnight and tomorrow when they count when California finishes counting, whenever that is. More pressure on him to show that we didn't overestimate his strength.
But I want to drill down, Stu, in just a minute or so we have left on how this happened, because his campaign did not expect that he would do so poorly in Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada. But they spent, what, a week? He lived in South Carolina for about a week and came out of that state with an enormous 30-some point advantage. And that has made all the difference.
Well, you know, Judy, all along, Joe Biden and his campaign said, I'll do well among a diverse electorate. And we kind of, oh yeah, okay, we poo-pooed it. And he didn't do anything in Iowa, didn't do anything in New Hampshire. I mean, finishing 4th and 5th is terrible. And although he finished 2nd in Nevada, I think he was with 19% of the vote, 19% of the caucus participants, so it was a poor showing. But it turned out to be right. The firewall held. The more diverse states, he's piling up wins. And now he appears to be the kind of the pragmatic alternative, although Mike Bloomberg is still in the race and may do well enough tonight to continue.
It'll be very interesting to see in those surveys done with voters today what they say about whether they think Biden is best positioned to defeat Donald Trump, because that electability question has been hanging over this entire election.
I think you might see a change in those numbers because in most national polls, equal numbers of people said that Biden and Sanders they would vote for Biden and Sanders over Donald Trump. With these victories goes a sense of inevitability and a so-called bandwagon effect, and that's a problem for Bernie Sanders if Joe Biden looks as if he's taking a commanding lead.
But right now, we do have a projected win for Bernie Sanders in the state of his own state of Vermont. But beyond that, Joe, it's a good night for Joe Biden.
Well, I think we also have him in Colorado.
That's right. We have him in Colorado as well.
In Colorado, which is important for him.
Very important. All right, Stu Rothenberg, thank you. And please join us right back here tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern, that's 10 Central, for our Vote 2020 PBS NewsHour Super Tuesday Election Special. The coronavirus outbreak has claimed more American lives and more American wealth. The death toll reached 9 today, with more than 100 diagnosed cases nationwide. And as economic damage spread, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell announced that the central bank is cutting a key interest rate by 0.5 point.
The virus and the measures that are being taken to contain it will surely weigh on economic activity, both here and abroad, for some time. Of course, the ultimate solutions to this challenge will come from others, particularly health professionals. We can and will do our part, however, to keep the U.S. economy strong as we meet this challenge.
The Fed's emergency move failed to reassure Wall Street, however. Instead, the market mired itself in doubts about whether this rate cut will help, and stocks gave up much of Monday's record rally. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost nearly 786 points today to close at 25,917. The Nasdaq fell 268 points, and the S&P 500 dropped 86. All of this came amid mounting questions about whether federal agencies are ready and nimble enough to confront the outbreak. William Brangham has that part of the story.
Concern is mounting across the U.S. today as the novel coronavirus known as COVID-19 emerges in a growing number of states. Top U.S. health officials took center stage before a Senate panel in Washington today to face a barrage of criticism and to defend their response. Democratic Senator Patty Murray represents Washington State, where the first American deaths were reported.
The administration has had months to prepare for this, and it is unacceptable that people in my state and nationwide can't even get an answer as to whether or not they are infected.
The head of the Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Stephen Hahn, said more testing kits will be made available later this week.
Our expectation in talking to the company that's scaling this up is that we should have the capacity by the end of the week to have kits available to the laboratories to perform about 1 million tests.
But other officials later walked back that number, saying the number of tests might be much lower. Republican Senator Mitt Romney voiced concern about the lack of protective equipment for health workers.
What percentage of what we would need for our medical professionals is in the strategic national stockpile?
Right now, if it were to be a severe event, we would need 3.5 billion N95 respirators. We have about 35 million.
So about 10%. It strikes me that we should have substantially more than 10% that what would be needed for a substantial pandemic. We should have that in stock. I can't believe that we, Congress, I'm not blaming the administration. This is Congress in appropriating, and it's prior administrations as well.
Congress is working to pass an emergency spending measure of potentially up to $8.5 billion to help bolster the U.S. response. Overseas, the virus continues to spread through more communities. Italy, the epicenter of Europe's outbreak, now has the highest number of virus-related deaths outside of China, 79. Iran's death toll also rose today to at least 77 people. Meanwhile, in South Korea, drive-through testing centers were set up across Seoul to minimize as much human contact as possible. The country reported its largest daily increase in official cases, more than 850 new infections. Elsewhere in the capital, troops fanned out to spray streets and alleys with disinfectant.
We're doing a fantastic job.
President Trump today said he'd consider cutting off travel from other nations with large outbreaks.
We're watching Italy very closely, South Korea very closely, even Japan very closely, and we'll make the right determination at the right time. We've cut it off, as you know, with numerous other countries.
In China, where the virus originated, the number of new cases today fell to 125 people. China's ambassador to the UN celebrated that news in New York.
China's fight against the coronavirus is indeed making huge progress.
Thousands of patients in China have recovered and have been released from the hospital. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
We'll take a look at the toll of coronavirus in Iran later in the program. At least 24 people were killed in central Tennessee early today when tornadoes tore through the area. The storms blasted downtown Nashville, damaged or destroyed at least 140 homes and other buildings, and forced the state to extend Super Tuesday voting hours. Stephanie Sy has our report.
We've been through lots of tornado warnings and never thought that this would happen.
Nashville is in shock today. Residents emerged from a night of deadly tornadoes that ravaged neighborhoods. The tornadoes were part of a band of storms that stretched across 4 states late Monday night into Tuesday morning. More than 40 buildings were damaged in Nashville alone, some beyond repair, as a tornado cut through the heart of the city. 4 Tennessee counties reported storm-related deaths, and Nashville hospitals treated dozens of people for injuries. Bill Lee is the governor.
Let me just acknowledge tragedy. It is heartbreaking. We have had loss of life all across the state. There are a number of people that are missing in different areas, many that are injured and being transported.
In the hardest hit areas, which included some of the most expensive neighborhoods in Nashville, the tornado reduced homes and other structures to a debris field. Search and rescue teams went door to door overnight, looking for trapped or injured people in damaged buildings, as road and power crews worked to clear down lines. Still, the closure of more than a dozen polling stations didn't stop many voters from lining up at alternate sites to cast their ballots. President Trump is planning to visit Tennessee on Friday. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
President Trump spoke by phone today with a top Taliban leader in a first for a sitting American president. It followed Saturday's signing of an agreement for a U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. Mr. Trump said that today's conversation was, quote, a very good talk. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu waited for final election results to see if he had eked out a majority in parliament. Netanyahu celebrated last night, but exit polls indicated that his political bloc fell 2 seats short. That could prevent his forming a government. The prime minister also faces a criminal trial on corruption charges. UN inspectors report that Iran has almost tripled its stockpile of enriched uranium since November. They also said today that Tehran will not answer questions about 3 possible nuclear sites. Iran has slowly violated the 2015 nuclear accord since the U.S., under President Trump, pulled out and reimposed sanctions. The military confrontation between Turkey and Syria intensified again today. In Syria's Idlib province, a Turkish soldier was killed overnight, and today the Turks shot down a Syrian fighter jet, the 3rd since Thursday. U.S. Special Envoy James Jeffrey visited the Turkish-Syrian border today and offered military equipment for the Turkish military.
Turkey has asked for help from NATO. They've asked for help from us. As the president said recently, we'll provide supplies and other things to Turkey. We're also looking at other requests that Turkey has made either to us or to NATO as this conflict goes on.
Turkey intervened in Idlib to stop a Syrian offensive that has driven almost 1 million people to the Turkish border. Refugees already in Turkey are now trying to cross into Greece with Turkey's support. So far, Greek authorities have blocked most of the attempts. Back in this country, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed today to let states prosecute immigrants who use fake Social Security numbers to get a job. In a 5-4 decision, the court's conservatives said nothing in the law prevents such action. The Kansas Supreme Court had barred state action. President Trump's re-election campaign has filed another defamation lawsuit, this time against the Washington Post. It accuses the newspaper of falsely reporting as fact that the 2016 Trump campaign conspired with Russia. The organization already filed a similar suit against the New York Times. And a passing to note, former CNN anchor Bobby Batista has died after a long battle with cervical cancer. She joined CNN Headline News as one of its original anchors in 1981 and remained with the company for 20 years. Bobby Batista was 67 years old.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
As the coronavirus spreads globally, few places have been as hard hit as Iran. 23 members of the nation's parliament are sick. The director of emergency services is infected, and a third Iranian government official died from the virus today. Special correspondent Reza Saya tells us from Tehran how the country's handling it and whom they blame for their travails.
At a popular gym in the heart of Tehran, workout music blares. But the weight room is nearly empty.
People are a little scared. Attendance has definitely dropped. We've seen at least a 50% drop.
On Tehran's usually bustling streets, the bumper-to-bumper traffic has suddenly vanished. Everywhere you look, surgical masks and reminders of personal hygiene. At offices throughout the capital, desk after desk, empty.
Tehran is frozen. It's like we're stunned.
What stunned this megacity and much of Iran is the coronavirus. The outbreak hit here 2 weeks ago. The numbers of people infected and the death toll have climbed ever since. Today, Iran is one of the global epicenters of the virus. Iran's Ministry of Health confirms more than 2,300 cases in all but 4 of Iran's 30 provinces. The death toll remains the highest outside of China. Everywhere you look, people are trying to figure out how to contain the virus.
All right, we're entering maybe the most posh shopping center here in Tehran. And as you can see, you have volunteers taking everyone's temperature here in their indoor parking complex. So my temperature reading is 35.5 centigrade, which is normal.
Up until a few weeks ago, Mohammad Reza Vakian was a parking toll collector here at the Palladium Shopping Center. Never did he think he'd be wearing a lab coat and taking temperatures.
Hopefully this will soon pass and no one else faces any problems.
I sometimes even have nightmares about corona.
Faizeh Khorasani is an English teacher.
Welcome to the class. Happy to see you.
She teaches her students online from home these days because, like the rest of Tehran schools, hers is shut down.
I feel a bit worried and I can say scared. You came here, you put the keychains on the counter. I was thinking, oh my God, I should remember to disinfect that.
Amir Parvandar doesn't have much trust either. He's looking for protective masks for his family, but he can't find a pharmacy that has them in stock.
This is the result of the chronic weakness of the management of our country. Unfortunately, when officials come and speak on television, it seems as if everything is great, but that's not the case. When you lose people's trust, even when you tell the truth, people won't believe you.
Many here wanted to believe Iran's deputy health minister when he appeared on television last week. In a heavy sweat, he said the outbreak was under control. One day later, he was diagnosed with coronavirus, one of several government officials who've tested positive. The growing number of cases have led some to question if the government is hiding the spread of the virus. It didn't help that just 2 months ago, it took the government 3 days before acknowledging it shot down a Ukrainian passenger plane, killing all 167 on board.
But many Iranians say in the struggle to contain the coronavirus, their government is not solely to blame. They say crippling U.S. sanctions against Iran have put severe pressure on the country's public health sector.
The Trump administration insists sanctions don't target humanitarian trade. But human rights groups say banking restrictions limit Iran's ability to buy humanitarian goods. Tehran pharmacist Ali Mazloumi says sanctions have made it impossible to purchase vital medical products.
The sanctions put in place by America, without a doubt, it's the people who are paying the price. They are the most vulnerable.
Last week, the U.S. Treasury eased some humanitarian trade restrictions against Iran. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington was ready to help Iran fight the outbreak. In his weekly press conference, streamed online due to the coronavirus, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman's picture was fuzzy, but his message to Washington was clear.
We have doubts about the United States' intention, and we do not count on its help.
Many Iranians feel the same.
A couple of days ago, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, "We care about the Iranian people. We want to help them." What was your reaction when you heard that?
BS.
BS.
Exactly.
America is one of the root causes of this problem. I have no expectations at all that America will help solve problems that America itself played a key role in creating. No, I don't have any expectations.
Tehran-based economic analyst Saeed Leila says U.S. sanctions are proof that the Trump administration doesn't care about the Iranian people.
Mike Pompeo said, "We're worried about the Iranian people." Why are you laughing?
Because he makes joke. I know that he is lying. He's a big liar. Mr. Pompeo doesn't like Iranian nation.
Leila says the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign has escalated tensions between Washington and Iran, crippled Iran's economy, and led to a sweeping victory by anti-U.S. hardliners in Iran's recent parliamentary elections.
This current radicalism which you are seeing in Iran, radicals who are governing the country, who are occupying parliament, next coming parliament, and so on, directly is a fruit or consequence of United States sanction against Iran.
But somehow, many Iranians remain hopeful for better days.
I hope one day these two countries can be friends. This is our wish. I am serious. Life, after all, is for happiness and peace.
With challenges mounting amid what could be a deadly pandemic, happiness and peace for many Iranians will have to wait. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Reza Sayah in Tehran.
And we'll be back shortly with a brief but spectacular take on how forests reveal the beauty of the natural world. But first, take a moment to hear from your local PBS station. It's a chance to offer your support, which helps to keep programs like ours on the air. A groundbreaking career in dance has led to an innovative approach to health and aging. Jeffrey Brown went to the American Ballet Theater to stay in step with Twyla Tharp. This encore look is part of our ongoing arts and culture coverage, Canvas.
Okay, good. Yeah. Sternum up, breathe deep, shoulders back. Now we stride, we don't...
A lesson from Twyla Tharp in allowing our bodies to take up space, even as we grow older. What she refers to as amplitude.
Amplitude, moving out, constantly feeling that you can move out. As age becomes a reality, I think we start to retreat, we retract, we become protective, we become secluded, and we begin to ossify.
But that's the body becoming smaller in a way it is becoming smaller.
Well, that's its problem. Let's just get on with it, shall we?
Tharp is one of the great choreographers of our age. And at 78, she's got a new dance, we met at a rehearsal at the American Ballet Theater, and a new book, Keep It Moving, Lessons for the Rest of Your Life.
I wrote this to help others believe that constantly you can be evolving, that you don't accept the rumor that as the body ages, it becomes less. It becomes different, hopefully more.
So do you think of this as a self-help book?
I look at it as a self-survival book.
As a girl, Tharp took dance and music lessons of all kinds. In the 1960s, she was dancing and choreographing as part of an important experimental modern dance scene. And by the 70s, she was creating groundbreaking works like Deuce Coupe for the Joffrey Ballet. Set to music by the Beach Boys, it brought together elements of both ballet and modern dance. She made Push Comes to Shove for Mikhail Baryshnikov, part of an acclaimed partnership that included the award-winning PBS special Baryshnikov by Tharp in 1984. Dance after dance, combining rigor and boundless energy. She also choreographed films, including Hair and Amadeus, and conceived and directed the Broadway hit Movin' Out to the music of Billy Joel. Tharp has been recipient of pretty much every prestigious artistic award, including a Kennedy Center honor in 2008. In her new book, she provides a series of exercises and says age is not the enemy, stagnation is the enemy.
We all have that laid on us by our culture. Being squirmy is not really, you can't do this at dinner parties, but this is how you keep your system, your metabolic system rolling by doing, you don't do it like this.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, you can't do this even in the way we're talking about, but you want me to. You want us to.
Yeah, because if you keep doing this, chances are your body is going to be more productive in the moment and you'll have something left in the evening, particularly as you become older and you buy into this reality that older folks can do less. Okay, prove it.
Her own physical regime is legendary. We watched an early morning workout at her home studio. Breathing and stretching, cycling, and various kinds of strength and resistance exercises.
I could bench my body weight for 3 and I deadlifted 227 pounds to the waist. Which was twice my body weight, okay? So, but I developed a core strength that the classical dancer doesn't have. Now in making a piece of this sort for a classical dancer, I can bring that kind of physical intelligence to them and say, try it this way. We'll begin with a fanfare, then we'll move along to the presentation.
In fact, her new dance, notated over 3 months in intricate detail, directly addresses aging. Titled A Gathering of Ghosts, it's made for dancer Germán Cornejo, now 38, who's being honored this season for 20 years at the ABT. Beyond talent, Tharp says, the quality she most looks for in a dancer is optimism.
Have a sense that you can do it, and if you don't, you'll fix it, you'll make it work, and you're going to laugh this time. No, you haven't failed. You turn it into comedy.
You've had, of course, great success, but you've also experienced failure.
Really?
Yes.
Are you kidding?
I'm sorry to tell you. But you advise us in the book, you know, to accept those failures, right? To take
They're
risks.
not failures. They're
they?
adventures of a different sort. You may not have gotten what you set out to get, but there is something to be learned from everything.
There was a profile in the Times that says, I'm quoting, Ms. Tharp remains among the very few female choreographers to have had a lasting influence on ballet.
Why don't they say one of the few short choreographers to have an influence on the ballet? The female nomenclature is highly abusive, it's ghettoizing, and it's irrelevant to what I've done.
You don't want to hear it at all.
I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I'm a worker. I'm an artist. I make dances. End of story. Judge me with the best. Don't judge me with the best women.
You wrote in the book that you're always asked, how do you keep working? And the subtext, as you say, is at your age. What's the answer? How do you keep working?
Day by day, daily. Do it every day. It's what you do. I look at the past to see what works and let go what doesn't work and build on what does work.
In the meantime, the final piece of advice that you give all of us in this book is shut up and dance.
That's right. Shut up and do what you love and, be grateful and keep doing it and stop second guessing it. Okay, very good. I'm getting old. I can't do what I love. Bullshit, in a word. It's going to change. That's all. It's not going to be the same. It's going to be different.
The dance is a gathering of ghosts. The book is Keep It Moving. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown at the American Ballet Theater in New York.
And now, tonight's Brief but Spectacular explores old-growth trees and the natural history of Wisconsin's North Woods. Author and naturalist John Bates takes us there. He's worked in the area for more than 30 years, helping people understand the diversity and the beauty of nature and our place within it. Bates' most recent book is titled Our Living Ancestors.
My interest in old growth took off in, about 2003. I'd been walking in older forests and found that they were quite rare and wondered why. Why did we cut so many down? They're a filter for air, they're a storage of carbon, they provide shade to our streams. I felt humility walking into these sites in a place where trees are 400 or 500 years old. I found myself feeling a deep gratitude that these trees were resilient enough to still be here. My job as a naturalist is to help people gain environmental literacy so that they have a deeper understanding of place based on this enriched understanding of where they are. If you're standing under an old white pine here in Wisconsin that's 400 or 500 years old, you are standing underneath a tree that Native Americans had stood under. The trees are living tissue. They're not hardened amber, they're not footprints, they're not stories people have told with all the biases that we have as human beings. They're travelers through time. And standing next to them, you can get this feeling of time having taken place. And you can't find that in any other setting, literally in the world. When you think about the history of Wisconsin, in 1830 we had our first census. There were 3,000 people. We became a state in 1848, and by 1870 there were 1 million people here. Every one of those people needed wood. And so we ended up cutting and then burning all of northern Wisconsin. So 99.8% has been cut.
Rare to find a big white pine like this. This is a crown jewel now in the North Woods.
Most of this land was sold on the dream of land that couldn't support farms. We have very poor soils compared to southern Wisconsin. We also have this thing called winter, which lasts for 5 months. And we had almost no market, so even if you could miraculously grow something, who were you going to sell it to? And so farmers went belly up, the land became tax delinquent. And in the early 20s, 1930s, 6 million acres of northern Wisconsin was made into public land because we couldn't figure out what else to do with it. In my old age now, my job, as I understand it now, is to help people fall more deeply in love with the world. I can't think what else I'm here for. My name is John Bates, and this is my brief but spectacular take on connecting time through old-growth forests.
Such beautiful pictures. And you can find all of our brief but spectacular segments online at pbs.org/newshour/brief. To recap tonight's results as we know them at this hour in today's Super Tuesday primaries. Of the 14 states voting today, polls have now closed in 12 of them. Former Vice President Joe Biden is projected the winner in Virginia, in North Carolina, in Alabama, in Oklahoma, in Tennessee, in Minnesota, and just moments ago in Arkansas. Senator Bernie Sanders projected to win in his home state of Vermont and in Colorado, and former Mayor Michael Bloomberg projected to capture most delegates in the U.S. territory of American Samoa. Now, it is too early for projected results in the following states, but here's where the count stands just before 10 o'clock Eastern in Maine, with over more than a third of the results in. You saw, it moved too quickly for me. Bernie Sanders just barely ahead of Joe Biden. They are neck and neck. That's in Maine. In Massachusetts, Joe Biden ahead with over 33%, almost 34% of the vote. Joe Biden back by about 6 points. In the state of Texas, here we are with just a little over 8% of the vote reporting, and Bernie Sanders is out front. This is a state he invested a lot of effort in, 28%, as you can see, to Joe Biden's 23%, Mike Bloomberg's 18%, meaning they're all viable. They all could end up with delegates, but it's early. And the polls have yet to close in Utah and in California. Joining me now from Houston, Texas, is our politics reporter, Dan Bush. Dan, we're hearing about long lines still at the polls in Texas.
That's right, Judy. A lot of long lines here in Houston. I was at one very large precinct where voters told me they waited for up to 2 hours. That was because the precinct had a set number of voting machines. They split them in half, so the Democrats got half, the Republicans got half. But of course, not a lot of Republicans in this Democratic-leaning voting precinct. So Republicans could just walk right in, Judy. Democrats had to wait for up to 2 hours. I heard similar things happening out in Austin, the capital of the state. So yes, the lines here are pretty long, but as you said, the results are starting to roll in and we're watching them very closely.
Sad story in democracy when people can't get to vote. Dan Bush joining us from Houston. Thanks very much. Please join us online throughout the night for the latest results on our website, pbs.org/newshour, and on our NewsHour YouTube page. And tune in here on PBS at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific for our NewsHour Super Tuesday special. I'm Judy Woodruff. For all of us at the NewsHour, thank you and stay with us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by Fidelity Investments, American Cruise Lines, BNSF Railway, Consumer Cellular, Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and the advancement of international peace and security at carnegie.org.
You're watching PBS.